The next thing is, how do members make decisions? Well, well, so there's three different types of things there. So there's a trustee, a delegate, and a politico. So basically, a trustee is where people are like, okay, we elected you, we're going to trust that you make decisions that you believe are right. So we're going to trust you. A delegate's like, well, I'm going to do whatever y'all say. So y'all voted, y'all elected me. I'm going to be like, alright, so what do you guys think? And then a politico is like, depending on the situation, is when I'm going to be either a delegate or a trustee. Easy, right? So the next thing is log rolling. So that's basically where it's like, hey, senator of Kentucky, so I'm going to vote for your thingamabobber if you vote for my thingamabobber. So it's like trading votes. Yeah. Alright, so the next thing is also, okay, so let's move on to the president, Congress president. So qualifications to be a president: you need to be a natural born citizen in the U.S. You have to be 35 years old. You must be a resident of the U.S. for 14 years. Got it? So then there's this thing called executive privilege, where the president can be like, this is a confidentiality type thing where I don't have to disclose any information to you because I'm president. Now, President Nixon tried using that when he was being, interrogated and investigated for the Watergate scandal. And he was like, we call executive privilege over me and these people talking about illegal stuff and how we're trying to do, talk. And they're like, that does not count. That is not protected. That does not go under executive privilege. Too bad, so sad. And then you have the, so, the powers of the president, let's go with that, that's very important. So, they have a cabinet that help them. There's 15 of them. It's the cabinet. The president has the power to appoint them, but they must be approved by Congress. They have the power to convey Congress, which has not happened that often. They have the power to make treaties, and that must also be approved by Senate. But in order to get around those, because presidents will cover, there's executive agreement, so they don't have to get approval for that. They can veto, as I've mentioned before. So there's limelight veto, and that's no longer allowed. Can't do that anymore. They're commander-in-chief, as I've stated. They're in charge of the Army, Air Force, and Navy. Boom, boom. And they have the power to pardon. Like President Nixon was pardoned. So it's like, you're convicted of this, I could make it all go away. Like your record is deleted. Sorry. You're welcome. And there's these things called inherent powers. Which are the powers that belong solely to the president that is enlisted in the Constitution. So it's like, hey, these are just yours. Those are the inherent powers. There's first ladies have become very important. When FDR started making presidents super active, so was his wife, like Eleanor was like that. Like, you look at Michelle Obama now, like she's on Disney and she's talking about like, hey, y'all need to eat right, need to exercise, and she was on iCarly talking about like the military families and how awesome the Carly and Sam were for doing stuff for the military family. Like, you got like out there, just so popular as the president. There's the executive office of the president, EOP. So that's basically like a mini. It's like a mini bureaucracy, which was created in 1919, and that's basically to help the president run his executive branch. Like, they're just like his little helpers, his little minions. Like, we're gonna do all this behind the scene work. And the staff at the White House also help him like a whole lot. Like, there's like you have like the Secret Service, and you have the head of the House and the head of White House staff, and he's like the most perfect person ever. Like, he's just like, like right hand man stuff. Public opinion is very important to presidents. So they like being out like and their presidential leadership, like they have to be good leaders, and because if not, there's like there's people won't vote for them again. Their popularity is going to go down. Their popularities are the highest at things like crisis, like 9/11. The presidents also, they go public, like, being on CNN, going on radio stations, being on the late night show, things like that. The presidents can do these things called, they can also do this, they have power to do things called executive orders, which is basically where they go to bureaucracy and they're like, this is exactly what I want you guys to do, so you guys gotta get it done. Like, you're gonna get it done because it's what I want. They specifically tell them, like, you're gonna do this regulation or this kind of act, and you're gonna do it because I say so. As mentioned in previous videos, there's the Office of Management, Budget and Management, which is basically like they help the president come up with a budget to propose to Congress. Very essential to our economy. Very, very essential. The president has to do the State of the Union address, which is basically where they talk about, what they've done so far, what they've accomplished, he wishes to accomplish. So he starts hinting at, like, hey, if you want certain bills approved, these are the bills that I would like, that I would totally approve of. Just saying. Just put it out there, There's the spoil and merit system. So the spoil system is, to the victor go the spoils. So it's basically a trickle-down system where it's like, if you win, you get all this stuff, and you get to appoint all your besties to all the best positions, and it's a trickle-down system. It's not really that worldly, where they got rid of that and give the merit system. So, like, whoever's most qualified, yeah, you can still appoint people that you like, but they have to be qualified to run their position, obviously, because you want people who know stuff about what they want. You don't want, like, losers and idiots doing so. Like, you want a good government, There's the bureaucracy. And that's basically, like, all the different departments, like, the departments and agencies and institutions that basically, like, enforce and regulate all the laws and regulations and policies and acts. So one of the big acts was the Pendleton Act, which was a reform measure that established the principle of federal employment on the basis of open, competitive exams, and created a civil service commission. So the basis is like, hey, you want this job, and we're gonna base, like, all your pay, and if you get this job and whatnot, on how well you do in these tests and stuff, and how well, like, you're qualified and whatnot. So that was the civil service, which is the merit system, is the civil service system. So there's this thing called the Independent Regulatory Commission, and that's, let's give you the formal definition first, so I can then break it down and put it into terms you will understand. So the formal definition is an entity created by Congress outside of major executive departments. So it's basically like the Interstate Commerce Commission was the first big independent regulatory. So they're basically like, hey, so it's not an executive department per se, but you're still, like, a part of the bureaucracy, and we kind of control you. And then there's the there's this thing called the general schedule, which is how people in the bureaucracy get paid. Like, that's the GS. So as I said, there's departments. There's which is the different cabinets, basically for the most part. There's this thing called the independent executive agencies, which they're all on their own, basically. It's like NASA, where they don't really fit into any one category, because NASA could go into, like, education or science, but it also goes to war, because we kind of have rockets going into space and satellites and spying and stuff like that. So the formal definition is a governmental unit that closely resembles a cabinet department, but have narrow areas of responsibility and perform services rather than regulatory functions. So they don't really do anything to help the government per se. They just do, like, they have their own thing. They do their own thing, they're independent. There's this thing called the Hatch Act that is also of importance, And that is It's an act that prohibited that civil servants from taking activist roles in partisan campaigns. So basically, like, if you work in Congress, you can't participate in a partisan campaign. A partisan means Democrat, Republican, Independent, that kind of election. So they couldn't like help at all because that's wrong for you to help. There's the Federal Employees Political Activities Act of 1993, and that basically changed the Hatch Act, and like you can contribute, but not on your, but like there were a lot of restrictions on like how much money you could do, what kind of how far could you participate, and all that stuff. Very limiting, but you know, at least I can participate, I guess, this time. There's these things called government corporations, which are businesses that were established by Congress to perform like specific functions that could provide that. It's basically like a private business, but the private business is for the government, not like by itself. It's for the government. So there's these, so they can, there's this thing called implementations where they can basically like, they basically enforce laws like I've stated before. There's these very important things called iron triangles, and that is to describe the relationship between the bureaucracy, the interest groups, and the congressional committees. But it's such a like the relationships are so complex they couldn't be defined as an iron triangle, so they're now known as like interagency councils that are, and also issue networks. And you know, because it's so more 3D than 2D thing, so I would like to call them the Iron Pyramid because it's 3D and complex, not 2D and flat and simple. So specifically, issue networks are, you know, the correct definition is the loose and informal relationships that exist among a large number of actors who work in the broad policy. So yeah, it's just like we're like buddies. We're not friends per se, but we talk and stuff. You know, we're buddies. Interagency councils are working groups created to facilitate coordination of policy making and implementation. So it's basically we're it's a group project. There's these things. There's a specific keyword that you should know. It's called the administrative adjudication. I can't pronounce words. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm not whatever. So it's a quasi-judicial process in which the bureaucratic agency settles disputes between two parties in a manner of similar ways to courts resolve disputes. So they kind of they're not courts because that's why it's quasi-judicial, but it's like they're the referees basically when they're like you guys gonna have a little quarrel, we're gonna ref it. All right, good. And there's this other thing called administrative discretion, which is basically the bureaucrats are able to like, alright, so they think if they think certain things should be done a certain way and that's the best way, they're gonna do it. They have the ability and the power to do it. And they can make rules and regulations like the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, you know, the planes, you know, regulations, stuff like that. So there's this thing, very important act called the Judiciary Act of 1989, which is a legislative act that established the basic three-tier system of the federal court system. So there's three systems, obviously, and before I go any further, I mentioned before, probably a couple videos ago, but you have to remember, judicial review, McClellan versus Maryland. Oh my goodness, no. Mulberry versus Madison, excuse me, I get my M&Ms confused. Oh my goodness, how did I mix that up? I was thinking M&M, but whatever. So, just to review Maryland, Mulberry versus Madison, important. So the three-tier system is basically there's the Supreme Court, which is the highest. We all know them, the Supreme Court justices. Then there's a trial court and the appellate court. I believe that's how you pronounce it. So a trial court is the court of original jurisdiction where a case begins. So that's like the lowest level. Is like the basic level. And then the appealment court is when you appeal, obviously, to do some where you're appealing the ruling of the case. And then the highest is where it's so extreme, where it's to be heard by the Supreme Court. So jurisdiction is basically all the evidence that's been heard in the case, like witnesses, physical evidence, all that good stuff. Original jurisdiction is what goes to the first trial, and appealment jurisdiction is is when they're reviewing the original jurisdiction, like all the original evidence. So there's two different types of law. I'll take a break now. There you go. There's two different types of law. So the first one is called criminal law. So that's formal definition here. Codes of behavior related to protection of property and individual safety. So that's like, criminal law is like, alright, I'm gonna protect, if you get assaulted, that person's gonna be taken to court. If they rape you, they're gonna be taken to court. If they run their car through your front door, they're gonna be taken to court. Civil law is formal definition here. Codes of behavior related to the conduct and relationships between individuals or groups. So, I don't like you. I'm gonna file a restraining order against you. That's civil law. I want to sue you because your face, whatever. So, and there's also different types of courts. So there's back to courts now. There's a constitutional court, which is specifically created for the U.S. Constitution, and it gets all its authority from Article 3. Or it is Article 3 actually. It's the Supreme Court. Constitutional Court is the Supreme Court. I should have put that at the beginning of this video in my list of order of things to say. And there's the legislative court, which is all the other courts that I mentioned earlier. Really should have put this in order. There's this document called a brief that contains a legal written argument in a case filed with a court by a party or prior to hearing trial. So it's basically an argument that you can send in. So it can be from an individual, it can be from interest groups, lobbyists, all those good things, all those good groups of people and individuals. There's a precedent, which is a prior judicial decision that serves a rule for setting subsequent cases of similar interest. So it's basically like, okay, so this is the same kind of case that came up a month ago. What did we do for that case a month ago? Oh, we did that, or we're going to do it for this. So it's like where you keep the same ruling for the same types of cases. Stare decisis is a court ruling, reliance on past decisions, or same thing. Stare decisis is the same thing as precedent. Senatorial courtesy is a process by which presidents generally defer the election of district court judges to which the senators of their own party who represent their state where vacancy occurs. There's no way to make that sound. It's already weird. I can't make it sound more weird by my explanation of it, so we're just going to stick to that definition of it. So there's certain criteria that you need to be nominated, and those things are you need to be so it's competence, ideology, policy preferences, rewards, pursuit of political support, religion, race / ethnic, and gender. Those things all go into will you be, am I going to nominate you? And then there's a confirmation process as well, and that consists of an investigation and lobbying of interest groups, Senate committee hearings, and then they vote. The Senate votes on whether or not you're going to be in or not. You can't sit with us. You can't sit with us. And then there's and then if they want you, it's like, you can sit with us, and we wear pink on Wednesday. And there's specific way on how Supreme Court decides to hear a case, and the most important one is the Rule of 4, where you need 4 Supreme Court justices to vote on the fact that they want to hear a case. So that's Rule 4. There's the writ of CERTIORARI. I can't pronounce it. And that's basically a request from the lower court, like, please, can you please just hear us out? Please review the case, please. No. There's a thing called amicus curiae, and that's like friend of the court. And it's a brief. It's like someone who will file a brief. And it's an actual person who will file a brief. Solicitor General, who is the 4th ranking member of the Department of Justice. They're basically like responsible for representing the U.S. government in the Supreme Court. So if there's ever like U.S. versus Supreme Court, or U.S. versus, I don't know what that would be, but if there's anything like on like the U.S. government's actually doing it in the Supreme Court, then the Solicitor General is the one who represents. He's like their lawyer. He's the lawyer for the government. Go with that. So hearing and deciding the case really comes down to oral arguments, which is like the amicus curiae, the briefs, and all that stuff. The conference and the vote, which is Rule of 4, and then written opinions, which go by the briefs. So there's these really important terms you really should know. So there's the first one is judicial restraint. It's a philosophy that judicial decision making, the positive courts should allow the decisions of branches and governments to stand in even when the other judges are principles. So basically, it's like even if you believe, it's basically like the judges, even if they believe one thing, they have to make a specific decision, even if it goes against what they believe. Like if it's right and constitutional, they have to do it, even if they don't believe it. There's judicial activism, which is the idea that judges should use their power broadly and use it for justice and be active. And then there's strict constructionism, which is where they do exactly to the T what the Constitution says that judges should do. Okay, so public opinion is very influential in the government, on the judicial branch. You have to know that. And yeah, that kind of concludes this video of chapter 7 through 10. So now you know key constants and terms from the 4 most important chapters of the entire book, which is the Congress, the President, the Judiciary, and the Bureaucracy. You're welcome. Bye-bye.